for instance, the border, having an open border.
There's no open border, Francis. Where's the open border?
Well, Trump has closed it, but before there was an open border.
It wasn't. What's your definition of an open border?
Well, you look...
Millions of illegals coming in.
That doesn't mean it's open. That just means they managed to come in illegally. That just means the border wasn't as secure as you wanted it to be.
Hold on a second.
Open border means I could just walk into America. Nobody could do that.
Well, hold on. If millions of people are able to walk into my house and I say, I've got an open door policy to my house, you go, that's not an open door policy. It just means people got in. I mean, come on.
No, I'm being very serious. If you want to use your house analogy, if you opened your house door and said, everyone come in, no, I'm not going to stop you, then fine, that is an open door policy. If people come into your house in the window in the middle of the night while you're calling the police...
That you left open.
Well, did they leave open?
Well, clearly, because the moment Donald Trump was elected, he closed the window.
Well, he closed it completely, which is ridiculous, because now you can't even claim asylum, which is a legal right. Joe Biden actually deported more people than Trump did in his first term. He actually detained and deported.
We're not talking about deportations. Hold on, let's just focus on the open...
Yes.
Mehdi, we're having a great discussion, and we're really...
Sorry, you triggered me with open border.
Clearly.
Yeah.
Yes.
But actually, I think we should talk about the issue.
Go on.
And we don't get triggered about it.
Go on.
Did the left lose control of immigration, or did the phrase open borders become a political weapon? And when millions cross illegally, is that a policy failure, a legal crisis, or proof that voters were right to stop trusting the system? In this exchange, Triggernometry hosts Konstantin, Kisin, and Francis Foster press Mehdi Hasan on illegal immigration, asylum, border enforcement, Democratic Party failures, public perception, and the language politicians use to shape reality. As the discussion unfolds, the exchanges become increasingly heated. Let's get into it.
Under the Democrats, unlike under both Labour and Conservatives in our country...
Numbers went up.
It's not just that numbers went up. I always give the stat. I came to Britain in 1996. When I came to Britain, 55,000 people a year net were coming in legally. More people now come into Britain illegally every year. Now, to me, you can argue about language, but when you have that, and in this country, in the United States, literally millions of people coming in illegally, and you can see that when there's a change of administration, that stops.
Okay.
You can disagree with us, at the extremes, and I think probably all of us do. But to describe that as an open border policy, I think it's quite reasonable, don't you?
No, because open border suggests anyone could walk into America, and that's not true.
Did. Millions of people did.
And millions of people didn't. Millions of people got detained. Millions of people got mistreated in camps. I mean, Joe Biden was not some dove on the border. Biden and Harris put together the most draconian border security legislation, which, by the way, Trump told Republicans not to vote for because he wanted more people to come in so he could win the election. But they put together... I'm on the left. I was criticizing Biden and Harris for being hawks on certain things. For example, child separation. For example, putting children, all of this stuff. They borrowed a lot of Trump policies. For the first year of their administration, they kept the same rule that Trump used under the pandemic to just kick people out, which was a nonsense rule. Did a lot of people come in? Of course they did. Record numbers came in. But again, why? Was it just because of an open border, or was it because of push factors, not just pull factors? What was going on in Central America in 2021 and 2022? The actual crises that drove people out, not just economic migrants, but yes, refugees as well.
This is where you're triggering me with all respect, because I walk around the United States.
It's called trigonometry, just keep triggering each other.
So that's why we're having this discussion. I mean, as I walk around the cities of the United States, and we travel here regularly, I'm shocked by the number of homeless people, right? And you could say, well, look, the push factors, the people who don't have somewhere to live, so that's why they're coming into your house. No, they're coming into your house because you've left the door open. And that's what was happening under the Democratic Party.
So that's not quite true. So let's look at the numbers. When Biden left office, right, in 2024, there were fewer people coming in than in Donald Trump's last year of office in the first term. That's just a fact. Go look at the numbers. The trends were down. You've got to look at trends. Clearly, there was a peak. I'm not disputing that.
Okay.
In 21, 22, huge peak. I was at MSNBC. We covered it all the time.
With that point,
but the point is, if it was an open border, why didn't it stay up, up, up? Why did it come down?
Because they realized it's a problem and they were trying to deal with it.
Then we agree there wasn't an open border.
No, there was an open border.
Okay, for 1 year, they were really bad at border security. Yes, let's concede that.
Okay. So we remember how we started this conversation. Francis actually I think you guys were agreeing a lot, but he said the left had failings, right? And one of those failings was the failure to enforce the border. And you've just conceded that in your telling it's 1 year. I would argue it's a longer thing.
Fine.
And it's interesting to me because I wrote about this in my book, actually, that the Democratic politicians and left-wing politicians in our country talked about the importance of border security and managing immigration well and carefully for decades. And then there was this moment, which meant, let me present the argument and you tell me what you think about it. My sense is there was a cultural view that immigration good, illegal immigration isn't illegal immigration, it's all asylum seeking. There is nobody who's trying to get in illegally. Everyone's trying to just find their way to a better life. And there was a cultural shift, which a lot of people call woke, where that was perceived as the morally right thing to do. And that's why across Europe and the United States, people in power, not just left-wing, by the way, but across the political spectrum, did leave the, I mean, you argue with the quibble with the word open, failed to have the border policies that the people of their countries repeatedly voted for. And that is one of the reasons Francis, I think, is arguing the left got the kicking that it did.
Well, can I untangle those two things? One is the electoral thing, which is a much more complicated issue. I don't know if we have time to talk about why did they get the kick in different places. There's incumbency, there's inflation. We've talked about many things. Populism, agreed. Clearly, immigration played a role. I'm on the left. So when you say the left failed, you might not like this, the no true Scotsman fallacy. The left hasn't been in power, right? And Tony Blair was not the left. Gordon Brown was not the left. David Cameron and George Osborne were not the left.
You can't play this game.
I can, because I criticized them from the left. If you tell me that there was an open border, I would say Tony Blair spent his whole life being hawkish on border. He gave asylum seekers vouchers. I spent most of the 2000s attacking Blair for being cruel to asylum seekers. Gordon Brown talked about British jobs for British workers. People say you sound like Nick Griffin if you remember 2010.
I do.
And then, for example, here in the US, Biden and Harris were way to the right of me on the border. Kamala Harris said, do not come. She went to Central America and said, do not come. Doesn't sound like someone with their door open to me.
But they did leave the door open.
That's a separate argument. But she went
in practice,
you can't have
they
the
left the
analogy
door
which said,
open.
okay, so in practice, people got in. I've never disputed that. Your argument was you opened the door, said come in. There's no evidence of that.
My argument is the fact that people at one point were not able to come in, and then they were, is evidence of a shift in policy. Is that a fair claim?
I don't know about its policy, because the Biden administration did copy a lot of Trump policies. For example, they got rid of Remain in Mexico, whereby Trump took people and said, you've got to go to Mexico and make a claim. You can't do it here.
Right.
He got rid of that. People said, oh, because of that, the numbers went up. I don't agree with that. I think the numbers were coming.
But why did the numbers go up?
I told you, because there were push and pull factors. The economy was opening up. Let me finish the sentence. The economy was opening up after COVID. The US economy, despite Trump's claims, was amazing on Biden's watch in terms of growth and jobs, record jobs growth. So when you have record jobs growth, people come for work. You need people from abroad, legal immigration. And number two, there was a lot going on in the Northern Triangle, in a lot of these Central American countries, a lot of crises, some crises that we've caused, with people coming in. So there were many, many factors. Was it also liberal bias? Maybe. But this idea that, the left, you said the woke, want virtue signals to be, everyone's an asylum seeker.
I didn't say virtue signal.
Okay, but the implication being they want to look good by saying everyone's an asylum seeker, no one's illegal.
No, that wasn't my implication. You feel free to answer once I just address this. It's not an implication thing. I think it's a change of worldview that happened. People changed how they thought about this issue.
On the ground, maybe. I wish it changed in government. This is what's amusing me listening to you guys. I wish these people existed in power. They don't. Joe Biden wasn't that person. Hillary Clinton wasn't that person. Tony Blair and Gordon Brown weren't those people. Keir Starmer is not that person. Keir Starmer and Shabana Mahmood are to the right of David Cameron in many ways on this issue.
They talk like they are.
Well, talking's bad because it has effects on the public and on our discourse. So I wish these people existed that you're telling me exist. Yes, there are people on the left who I know and I'm part of who did take a much more open border stance, who did say, actually, a lot of these people are asylum seekers and you shouldn't demonize them all. I'm not sure I saw that in policy or in government. I wish, maybe I missed it, but I didn't see Joe Biden make the case emotionally for refugees and asylum seekers during his administration.
But I'm just a little confused here, Mehdi, because your point about push factors, I think is true. More people want to leave countries when there's economic problems, etc. But you can't deny that policy shifts change the number of people who will come through a door, depending on whether that door is ajar or open or closed.
But if the alternative policy, as Francis said, was, will Trump shut the border? Do I agree with that? No, that's ridiculous. Do I believe in building a wall? No, we have to allow migration into this country because we need it for the economy. And we have to allow asylum seekers in this country because it's the legal thing to do. It's our obligations under multiple international conventions and US law. He's blocked all of that. Would you agree that people should have a right to asylum in the US?
I think my view on asylum is very simple. And this was true for Ukrainian people in my family, which is that you should apply for asylum in the area that you're in. And then if you're approved, you get to travel to the country. We shouldn't have people crossing.
So you would change all international law and US law?
Absolutely.
Okay, but right now, we haven't changed that. So under our current legal obligations, people should have a right to claim asylum.
Hold on. The solution to asylum is actually very simple, which is you set up asylum processing centers near the countries where there's war and conflict and so on. And then you filter out the people you want to come.
So I don't necessarily fully disagree with you. What's interesting is a lot of these solutions require people with good faith, good intentions, competence, funds. Half the problems of the immigration system in this country, if you talk to immigration lawyers as I do, they're not all open borders advocates. They're saying, why do we not have enough judges to process the claims? Why is there a backlog? Why do people disappear into America when they arrive? Because there's no court hearing, there's no court date. Why is there no fully funded system of lawyers and judges? It would cost a trivial percentage of what we spend on ICE. It's linked, because if you deal with that, then you deal, because you said policy and election, so I'm coming to that. One of the reasons why immigration has worked for the right is because it looks like chaos, and it is chaos.
It is
but
chaos.
It's manufactured chaos. So when Biden and Harris put a bill together, not one I agreed with, but a draconian bill to really shut down asylum claims and immigration at the border, Republicans voted against it for political reasons, because there was an election coming up.
Yeah.
So they don't actually care about solving the issue at the border.
A bigger conversation.
I agree. It goes back 20 years. Marco Rubio, who's Secretary of State right now, who's now a hardcore hawk because he works for Trump, he was a guy in favor of amnesty, right? Marco Rubio, whose grandfather was deported, he was in favor of an amnesty for migrants' country. Today, MAGA would destroy him if he dared say that. But that was part of the solution. What do we do about 15 million people in this country? You can't just deport them all.
This is a totally separate point. I think the way, sorry, I'm talking for Francis Olay, but I just want to...
That's why I called you Francis.
That's right. I want to get to the bottom of this. Across Europe and the entire Western world, there was a gigantic shift within our lifetimes from what I would consider sensible immigration policy, which is you welcome in the people that you've looked at their background, you think they're going to be a positive addition to your country. You do it in numbers that are manageable. You give people an opportunity to integrate. You do it in a way that is not disruptive to the existing population of the country, that people don't feel unsettled, the infrastructure is not under pressure. That's what we had for the entirety of my lifetime. And everybody agreed.
Yeah,
and then,
I'm not sure I agree.
Well, that was my experience. And then suddenly at some point, whatever happened, that changed, and you got to a position where lots and lots of people effectively advocated for or tacitly supported a policy whereby we didn't enforce the border in the way that we used to, and we allowed mass flows of immigration from all over the world.
So you're mixing together different things. Here's where you're 100% wrong.
Okay.
You can't enforce a border if you're in the EU. Let us not forget that what you're talking about, the period, forgive me, when did you move to the UK?
1996.
Okay, so early 2000s, you will remember, Tony Blair as Prime Minister, huge debate about Eastern Europeans.
Well, he failed to introduce transitional controls, which is why we got 1 million people instead of 13,000.
But it was still part of an EU debate. You accept we were in the EU. There was free movement, right? So there was free movement within the EU. You can have a debate about what the deals he should have done with the French and others. But the EU was the issue. It wasn't people from Iraq, Syria at the time. I mean, they were there, but they weren't the big issue.
Right.
And then we voted for Brexit. So apparently, the British public did this mad thing where they voted for Brexit. And what happened? Numbers went up from other parts of the world. As you know better than me, you're living there. So this is a problem with these kind of populists on the right who kind of sell you a bill of goods, is Brexit vote didn't solve the problem of immigration.
No, it didn't.
Because you can't be King Canute and just say we're going to ignore the state of the world. You mentioned like massive flows. First of all, massive compared to who? Compared to the developing world, they take the bulk of the refugees in this world.
Compared to the entire history of our countries.
I'm saying you have to take a global perspective and say these numbers are minuscule compared to what a Turkey or an Iran or an Afghanistan or a Pakistan has had to deal with. The vast majority of refugees live in the developing world. A few of them manage to get into Europe, and then we lose our minds. And by the way, a lot of these people who are coming in, where were they coming in from? Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, Libya. Do we have anything to do with those countries? I think we do. So I do think those of us who said, you know what, we do have a moral responsibility. We helped fuck up a lot of these countries. Let's just be very honest about that, either directly or indirectly. It's funny that you have Richard Tice and Farage now backing this war in Iran and saying we stand with the Persian people. Apparently, and you can fact check this, I read this, I don't live in the UK, so I read this online, the second or third highest number of people on the small boats coming across are Iranians. So the irony of them saying that we support Iran while also being the people who turn away people fleeing the regime in Iran is not lost on me.
But the problem is, Mehdi, is a public perception of the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And they saw...
And I agree with this, I think it's weak.
Yeah, and they saw what happened under Biden, and they're thinking to themselves, I don't want to go back to that. I don't want that to happen again. And that's going to be their real challenge.
Yep.
Because look, as someone who's half Venezuelan, I walk around the streets of New York, and then you see what's happening with some Venezuelan, a minority of Venezuelan people, Tren de Aragua, etc. People will quite rightly ask, why are these people here? Why didn't we get rid of them under Biden?
So it's interesting you should say that. There's the funny thing about the American public, we talked about this earlier, 8-second memories. When Biden was in office, they were super anti-immigration. I agree. Look at the polling. It was definitely a problem. Right now, Look at the polling right now, a year into Trump. They're more pro-immigration than the American public's been for decades. Support for immigration is now, I think, near record highs. Why? Because Trump went the other extreme. And now they're not thinking about the Biden era. They're looking at ICE agents shooting people in the street. They're hearing horrific stories of their friend's grandmother being pulled from her garden while gardening by masked agents of the state. So actually the Democrats are in a very, very strong position on this issue now because Trump has been so typically fascistically extreme that actually the immigration issue is now. I know you mentioned earlier, like talk about the border, not interior. It's actually all about the interior now. It's all about ICE. It's all about, Stephen Miller and his white supremacist rhetoric and this, this plan to make America white again. The White House put out a post, one of these memes, the Department of Homeland Security, saying 100 million deportations. Think about that. That's insane. 100 million deported would be US citizens are getting deported. People like me are getting deported. People who are born here are getting deported. That's just insane. So that's turned the American public actually against what the administration is doing. It actually made them much more positive about immigration. And as the economy tanks further, I think you'll see a lot of businesses also remembering the virtues and values of immigration. So look, there is a problem. I don't deny that. But when we talk about the public, we also have to accept that the media plays a big role in this, right? A lot of what the people think about immigration. My favorite poll when I lived in the UK, there was polling done in the UK, I think by Gallup, that if you ask people in the UK, do you think immigration is a national problem? Yes, it is. Do you think immigration is a problem in your community? No. Why is that? Because in their community, in their lived experiences, they're not seeing gang members on their streets. They don't have immigrants causing them problems. But they hear from the Daily Express and the Daily Mail and Tory politicians and now reform politicians that it's a huge problem nationally. Same thing in the US. You ask Americans what proportion of the country is migrant or Muslim. They give you massive percentages because they think that immigrants have taken over the country. You're in the US, ask Republicans, I'm sure you're interviewing prominent Republicans, ask them about Muslims in the UK. They think Muslims run the UK. They think London has fallen to an Islamic caliphate, right? This is the kind of insane rhetoric that Elon Musk pumps with his algorithms. So I do think a lot, when you talk to me about public opinion, I think public opinion is something you should change. I don't think politicians should just blindly follow public opinion. They should lead. And one of the things Donald Trump was able to do is get his entire base to switch their views on Russia, switch their view on tariffs and free trade. That's what Democrats should aspire to do. Try and change people's hearts and minds.
What makes this exchange still matter is that immigration has become much bigger than immigration. It is now a debate about trust in government, trust in media narratives, and whether political language describes reality or protects one side from criticism. That is why the argument gets tense so fast. Mehdi Hasan rejects the phrase open border because America did not have an official policy saying anyone could simply walk in. The hosts push back because when millions enter illegally and the system looks overwhelmed, voters do not experience that as a technical distinction. They experience it as disorder. That is the core tension. Mehdi is arguing from definitions. Konstantin and Francis are arguing from perception. And in politics, both matter. A phrase can be imprecise and still capture what people feel they watched happen, but it can also hide the human reality underneath. The left often talks about immigration through compassion, asylum, and human rights. People fleeing violence or poverty are not just numbers, but compassion without competence creates backlash. It was not enough to say migrants deserve dignity while voters saw overwhelmed shelters, pressure on public services, and a system unable to answer basic questions. Who gets to stay? Who has to leave? Who enforces the rules? That silence created a vacuum. The right filled it with simpler language. Open borders, invasion, chaos, criminals. Some of it was exaggerated. Some of it was built to provoke fear. But it worked because it attached itself to something real. Many people felt the system was no longer controlled. At the same time, the answer cannot be cruelty. A broken asylum process does not justify treating every migrant like a threat. Anger at government failure should not be redirected toward the most vulnerable people in the story. The real question is whether a country can be both humane and serious. Can it protect asylum while enforcing borders? Can it welcome immigration while admitting that speed, scale, and integration matter? Can it discuss public anxiety without turning migrants into scapegoats? So was Mehdi right to challenge the language? Were the hosts right that voters saw a real failure? And can any movement survive if it keeps telling people that what they feel is happening is not actually happening? Let me know what you think in the comments, but keep it focused on evidence, not insults. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.